Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever wonder if worrying about climate change actually makes you do more to help the planet? This new study dives deep into that question. So, we all know climate change is a big deal, right? It affects our world, and it can affect how we feel too, leading to something called climate anxiety. It's that feeling of worry, nervousness, or distress about the future of the planet. And what it means for us. Now, some people think this anxiety is a good thing, a wake-up call that pushes us to act. Others worry that if the anxiety gets too intense, it might actually make us freeze up, like we're too overwhelmed to do anything. This is sometimes called eco-paralysis. The researchers were particularly interested in whether to raise a non-linear association, meaning it's not just a simple straight line. They had a hunch, based on some older theories about how arousal and stress affect performance, that maybe moderate levels of climate anxiety would be best for driving action, but very high levels might lead to that paralyzing feeling. To figure this out, they did something really cool called an individual participant data meta-analysis. This sounds fancy, but basically instead of just looking at the final results from different studies, they gathered the raw data from each participant from multiple studies. Imagine getting a massive pile of 6,000 plus individual surveys and reports, and then analyzing them all together. This lets them get a much clearer picture and test questions that the original studies might not have focused on. They collected data from 12 different studies that all use the same main way to measure climate anxiety, called the Climate Change Anxiety Scale, or CCAS. This is important because using the same measuring stick across studies helps make the comparison fair. They also made sure the studies measured pro-environmental behavior, or PEP for short. Things like recycling, conserving energy, choosing sustainable products, and even advocating for climate policies. So, after gathering all this data, they had information from over 6,000 people. They looked at how people's scores on the climate anxiety scale related to their pro-environmental behaviors. First off, they found a clear and strong connection. People who reported higher levels of climate anxiety impairment also reported doing more pro-environmental behaviors. This was consistent across many of the studies they analyzed. However, things got more interesting when they looked at the non-linear part. They used a statistical test that looks for a curve, specifically an inverted U-shape, which would support the idea that too much anxiety leads to paralysis. And guess what? They found a statistically significant negative curvature. This means the relationship wasn't a simple straight line. This statistically significant square term suggests that at higher levels of climate anxiety, the increase in pro-environmental behavior might slow down. But, and this is a big but, they didn't stop there. They used another method called the two lines approach, which is often considered more reliable for testing these kinds of curves than just looking at a quadratic term. This two lines approach helped them see what was really happening. They found a breakpoint, a kind of turning point in the data below this point as climate anxiety increased, pro-environmental behavior increased strongly. But above this breakpoint, the increase in pro-environmental behavior became much smaller and even not statistically significant. This is crucial. It means that while higher anxiety might not lead to less pro-environmental behavior, it also doesn't lead to proportionally more. It's like a car reaching its top speed. You can push the pedal harder, but you don't go much faster. They call this a leveling off, or saturation point, rather than a drop-off. So, what does this tell us? It seems that climate anxiety is indeed a motivator for pro-environmental action. People who are more worried tend to do more things for the environment. This supports the idea of climate anxiety acting as a practical anxiety, or an initial catalyst. However, the picture isn't as simple as just more anxiety equals more action. The findings suggest that at very high levels of anxiety, the motivation to act doesn't keep increasing at the same rate. It levels off. This is different from the eco-paralysis idea, where people would stop acting altogether. Here, people seem to keep acting, but the additional anxiety doesn't push them to do significantly more. One explanation the researchers offered is that people might feel they have some control, even if it is just through their own actions. This sense of agency, whether individual or collective, can help prevent complete paralysis. They also suggested that the levels of anxiety measured in these studies might not have been high enough to trigger true eco-paralysis for most people. It is possible that only the most extreme cases of anxiety lead to that stage. Now, like all research, this study has its limitations. One of the main ones is that they focused on a specific measure of climate anxiety, the CCAS, which is particularly focused on impairment. This means their findings might be different if they had used other ways of measuring climate anxiety, especially those that focus more on just the emotional distress. Also, they relied on self-report measures for pro-environmental behavior. This means people were asked what they do, and sometimes people might say they do things they don't actually do, or they might overestimate their actions. It would be interesting to see if actual behavior, measured in different ways, shows the same pattern. And finally, they noted that they couldn't account for all the societal and structural factors that influence our behavior. Things like social norms, how easy or hard it is to perform certain eco-friendly actions, and even our personal circumstances in the face of the climate crisis. So, to wrap it all up, this study gives us a more nuanced understanding of how climate anxiety and pro-environmental behavior are linked. It's not a simple story of worry more, do more, or worry too much, do nothing. Instead, it seems that as climate anxiety increases, our pro-environmental actions do too. But this effect starts to level off at higher levels of anxiety. Climate anxiety can be a powerful initial motivator, but it might not be enough on its own to sustain ever-increasing action. This is really important because it challenges some of the older ideas and suggests that while climate anxiety can be distressing, it doesn't necessarily lead to despair and inaction for most people. Instead, it seems to keep us engaged, even if the motivation doesn't ramp up indefinitely. What do you all think about these findings? Does this match your own experiences or observations? Wednesday love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And if you found this breakdown helpful, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to RUBIN'S Mind Lab for more dives into fascinating psychology research. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.